flipped classroom video. The purpose of tonight's lesson is to show you the difference between skillful expository writing and not so skillful expository writing. The purpose that we're doing this lesson tonight is so that you can use these skills to fix your own writing, to do revision that's really going to make your writing pop. It's very hard to fix something that you don't know is broken. And it's very hard to compare something if you don't know what a good version of it looks like. So when you read your rough draft, unless you know what good writing looks like and what qualities you should look for in your paper, it's going to be very hard for you to know where to revise. The rubric we're going to look at today is a rubric that combines all of the 6 traits, from ideas down through conventions, and describes what a really strong paper would look like if all of those traits were at their best. Before we look at specifics of each paper, we're going to talk a little bit about what expository writing is and the kinds of writing you can use this rubric to judge. Expository writing is any of the real-world writing that was on that chart that you glued into your notebook last class. Real-world writing includes, it's up in the left-hand corner. It's writing, you are writing to express and reflect. You are writing to analyze, to inquire, to inform, to interpret, to evaluate and judge, to take a position and defend it. This is the kind of writing that we're talking about with this rubric. If you look at the rubric, a 5 or a 6 paper is a paper that's all about the strengths. An exceptional paper, a 6 paper, would have nothing but strengths, no real weaknesses in the paper. All of the traits are at a 6 level. A strong paper is a paper that is still very strong, but there are certain traits that there are weaknesses in. Some of the traits are not at a 5 or a 6 level. If you look at a 4 paper, that paper is a paper where the strengths and the weaknesses are equal. There are as many strong traits as there are weak traits. If you look at a 3 paper is a paper where there are still strengths and weaknesses, but there are more weak traits in the paper than strong. An emerging paper, a 2 paper, is a paper where there are still strengths and weaknesses, but the weak traits highly outweigh the strong traits. And finally, a 1 paper is a very basic beginning point paper, and that's a paper where there really are no strong traits. All the traits need to have work. What I'd like to do now is I would like to look at the difference between a 5-6 expository writing paper and a 3-4 expository writing paper. A 5-6 paper is there are more strengths than there are weaknesses. Now you're thinking, okay, what's the difference between a 5-6 and a 3-4? Well, if you look at the beginning of the checklist, you'll see that the 5-6 paper talks about deeply what really matters if you're going to master the topic. I really know a lot about what I'm talking about. If I'm a 5 or a 6 paper, I really know what it means to be a skater, for example. Where if it's a 3-4 paper, I've given you all the information I can give you in the magazines. Done reading my paper, you're not going to know what it feels like to be a skater. Only a 5 is going to give you that. Let me get rid of these trait markers so that we can look at this rubric. We can move down the rubric without having to look at the trait markers. So if you look at a 3-4 paper, you get an overview of what it's like to skate, and you might get a few key facts, but when you're done, you have no idea what it feels like to be a skater. Only a 5 or 6 paper gives you that. I go beyond the basic facts. Another way of thinking about that is I offer you an insider's perspective. You know what it feels like to be a skater. A 3 or a 4 paper you still are somebody who only knows what you would get out of the book. You still feel like an outsider, somebody who's not really in the know about the paper, about the topic. Another way of looking at a 5-6 paper is to look at the information that they've included. Are there details in there that surprise you? Are there details that you would only know if you had read this paper? Are there details in this paper that you wouldn't get if you just read the dictionary or an encyclopedia entry about it? On the other hand, a 3 or a 4 paper, there's really not a whole lot in there that isn't already common knowledge. It's details that you pretty much know if you've listened to anybody talk about skating. You really don't know any more when you finish the paper than you do when you began. If you look at how a 5 or a 6 paper is organized, a 5 or a 6 paper is very, very well organized. There isn't a moment when you are lost. You would know exactly how every bit of the paper fits together. You know how the first paragraph helps you understand the second paragraph, and how the second paragraph helps you understand the third paragraph. It takes the interesting facts and it connects it back to those main basic facts. Where in a 3 or a 4 paper, it's focused and it stays on topic. But it doesn't really connect the dots for you. You're not quite sure how paragraph 1 makes paragraph 2 more clear. And you're not quite sure how paragraph 3 and paragraph 4 add up to give you some kind of new information. Paragraph 5 gives you little insider details that helps bring the topic to life. There's someone behind this paper. It isn't just an anonymous purpose at the textbook factory giving you basic facts. Okay? You're not even sure, perhaps, where those facts came from. Finally, a 5 or a 6 paper has a compelling voice. There's somebody behind this paper who cares about the subject, and they're telling you what it means. It's a skater who's telling you about skating, rather than a salesman in a skating store trying to convince you to buy the most expensive skateboard. A very good example of a 5-6 paper that you know about would be the spider romance. A spider romance, the article Spider Romance, was the article in your nonfiction packet that talked about the mating habits of spiders. But there was a voice in that. There were interesting facts that you maybe wouldn't have gotten from an encyclopedia, or he presents them in a way that you would have never thought of putting a picture in your head with. Spider Romance, the person who wrote that loves spiders, and they want you to love spiders too. The person who wrote Spider Romance actually connects how spiders mate to how human beings mate. Think about the way he finishes Spider Romance. He finishes it comparing it to human girls. You're certainly not going to get that kind of voice in a textbook or in a dictionary. That's what makes Spider Romance a 5 or a 6, compared to a passage about the mating habits of spiders from a dictionary, an encyclopedia, or a science textbook. The purpose of talking about the differences between exceptional, strong, and average is so that you can look at your rough draft and decide which of these fits my paper. Is my paper, does it go deeply into my topic, or am I just kind of giving you an overview, what I got from the magazine article I read? If that's what your paper reads like, then you need to go in, you need some strategies for focusing ideas in your topic. If you read your paper and there's details that are surprising and go beyond the obvious, then your ideas trait is strong. But if you haven't really given the reader anything new to think about, that's an area that you need to work on to revise. When you look at your rough draft, Is it well organized? Does it lead the reader through the paper without them wondering why this is there or having to read?
Kemper, if you are still here, we were going to meet briefly in my office this afternoon, Miss Warren, and you and me. If you still can do that, could you come on down? Mrs. Kemper, could you come on down to my office if you are still able to meet this afternoon for a few moments? Thank you.
Sorry about that. You can tell I'm taping at school this afternoon. You're going to take the information that you can get from this rubric. You're going to look at the rubric and you're going to compare. How is the exceptional paper different from that middle-of-the-road paper? And how is the middle-of-the-road paper different from the low paper? In your summary of today's tape, you're going to talk about what did you learn? What did you learn about the differences between papers? Because in class, you're going to apply this information to your own paper. This is going to help you decide what strategies do I need when I sit down and actually revise my paper. When you're finished with the video, you're going to do a summary of what you've learned from this paper. You're going to write at least a 5-sentence summary in 5 complete sentences to show me what you've learned from the tape. And then you're going to write a question. It could be a question that you still have about the material on the rubric, or it could be a question that you think is going to challenge your classmates' understanding. You're going to do this to prepare for tomorrow's class.